Okay. All right. So now can you guys all see me now?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So the Grizzly King. The material for the Grizzly King, the tail is red duckquill. That's this stuff. And the duckquill that you want to make sure you have a matched pair, that they curve away. The short side curves away from you, and you make them face the each other, so that when you cut out your little slips out of this part of the quill, they have the opposite curve. And to cut those out, I just generally put the scissor in and put them at about a 45-degree angle to the quill, and then just snip a little piece of quill. So what you end up with is on my finger. What you end up with is these guys, two little slips, and that's for the tail. The the rib is a tinsel, and because I'm working on this relatively small fly, um, I'm using a number 14, fairly thin tinsel, and this tinsel is gold on one side and silver on the other, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. The body of the fly is green floss. This is 4-strand floss, so you have to be a little careful when you're winding it on that it doesn't flatten out on you too much. Uh, the hook, I've tied it on small ones like this guy here. This is just a small standard wet fly hook. But for today, I'm going to use a slightly longer hook. And this is a Daiichi. It's a size 12, and it's got a little bit extra shank length. I think the standard wet fly hook, you end up with a very short body. Just get a hook out of the package here. And I was telling the guys earlier, I've been having some troubles with vision lately. I was diagnosed with glaucoma, and so they've been trying to treat that, and it's caused me some other visual issues. So anyway, so there's the hook. This is a barbed hook, so we'll take the barb off right off the bat. Stick that in the vise. So I'm going to use the magnifier because that helps me a little bit. It might look a little odd in the image, but it makes it easier for me to see. Thread. I'm using 6/0. Could probably get away with a slightly lighter thread. So I'll start right behind the eye of the hook. This is not tight enough. There we go. Right behind the eye of the hook. And I'll just wrap it back. And right behind the eye, because sometimes these hooks have a little gap behind the eye that if you have a real fine tippet on it, it'll get caught in there. So I just make sure I do that, and I wrap the hook all the way back over the thread, and that will make a little smooth base where the floss does not flap around in the wrong way. It just makes sure that the floss will lay over top of another and give you a flat body. So we'll get him back to the back end. Then I'll take my slips of red goose quill, and I will line them up with the tips together. and hopefully opposite curve. So if I get them together and get the tips evened up, pointing up and a little bit opposite curve, and then I'll tie the tail in, and I want the tail to be a little more than the gap of the hook behind. So I'll set that right on top of the hook, pinch it good, get the thread up between my fingers, down the far side, and then I'll bring it up, pull up so that the quill sits on top of the hook. And again, I'm going to tie that right up the shank of the hook till it's leaving a sort of the thorax of the fly bare. But I'm going to make sure to cover the shank of the hook relatively evenly with the butts of the quill. Get some light up there. That might help. And then we'll wrap just quickly back to try and keep that relatively even, because I'm going to start wrapping things forward, and I don't want a bunch of bumps along the way. Okay. Now, sometimes if you want that tail to stick up a bit, what you do is you lift the tail up, you make one wrap behind, pull a little bit forward, and then make a wrap in front. And that will cause the tail to flare up a little bit. See how that goes. Now, the next tip is the tinsel. I'm going to just strip a piece of tinsel off the spool. It's nice to use these spool keepers, but for this size of fly, they kind of get annoying. So this tinsel has got gold on one side and silver on the other. So to make it show that the silver side shows on the top, I'm going to tie this tinsel in with the gold side on the near side of the hook, with the gold side facing me. I'll just lay that down there and make a quick little wrap. And because the gold fly faces me, that first wrap that I make with the tinsel around the hook is going to flip over and face the silver side out. There we go. Let's go right. And then I'll get my floss, which is a nice shiny green. And this I'm going to leave attached to the spool. So once again, I need to build a little bit of bulk in the body. Otherwise, the floss is too fine, and it causes the body to be too skinny. So I'm going to put it here and tie it down. And then wrap back. Till I get to where the tinsel is. And then ease my thread forward. And at that point, I will do a little half hitch right at the eye of the hook. And then I use my bobbin rest to keep things out of the way. And this makes it a little easier to wrap the floss. Now, what I'm going to do is twist the floss a bit so that it's all the fibers are lined up. With this 4-strand floss, if you don't do that, it makes it really difficult to get a flat body. And then we just do touching turns of that floss up the shank of the hook. Every once in a while, it'll try to separate on you like that. So I need to counter wrap it to make sure that it stays relatively flat. And then I'm going to leave about an eye's width in front of the hook, bare for the head and the throat. I'm not going to wrap it all the way to the very front. I'll get my thread over top. And then wrap in front. Oh, nice and close. Right. So far, so good.
Someone with an 844 area code sent a long message.
What the heck was that?
That was my phone.
Oh,
Put it on mute.
no problem. We had a little trouble getting logged in on Zoom today, so I wondered if maybe we'd had an issue with Zoom.
I had no issue logging in.
Oh, good. Yeah, because I had to go back. I used the link that was on the email, and it didn't seem to work properly to start with. So I had to log out and back in. I'm going to take my knuckle pliers, and the first wrap, I want to make sure I get my hand so that I have the silver side facing out. And then I'll take my knuckle pliers and I will use the rotary on the vise to make maybe, let's get that a little better. Maybe 3 or at most 4 wraps up the body of the fly. And when I get there, I'm done that. Get my bobbin out of the way. Wrap that down. Lift it up. And wrap behind, and then in front. Tinsel off. Again, I'm going to try to leave a little bit of room at the front for the head. So I'm just going to make sure that that butt end of the tinsel is wrapped down. Bring my thread back to a good eye width behind the eye of the hook. And now, some people will tie this with a small grizzly hackle that you wrap around and then push down on the top. But I find that doesn't work particularly well for me. So I'm going to make the throat of this thing with a nice soft grizzly hackle that I happen to have a small neck from. And it has reasonably long fibers, enough to make a decent throat. And I'll just come in here and take about a thumb's width of those off the shank of the hook, of the feather. And I end up with a little clump of grizzly hackle like that. And I'll set that hook upside down underneath things. And I will hold the hackle up so that it stays away from the shank and it stays underneath the hook. Once I got that done, I'll pull the front stuff that's sticking out the front backwards. Trim that. There we go. So now we have a throat that goes back that kind of covers the gap between the front of the fly and the back. Just a little bit of stuff here that needs to come out. It's sticking out the wrong side. All right. Moment. Okay. And then for the wing, I have these guys, some teal flank. And I will take that out of here. And I will find a feather in the package that's not too wide and a little bit flat. These guys come with some curve to them. So what I'll do with this teal flank, nicely barred, and you can see it's going to extend almost to the tail. And so what I'll do is strip the fuzz off the front, like that. And measure, that's about right. And then to take a little bit of the curve out, I'll just use my thumbnail and run it down the far side of that quill. So it straightens the quill out a little bit so that it's not as heavily curved. With that, I'll place it down on the top and tie this down. And then use the stem to just adjust the position and length a bit so that it's approximately the right length. And pull the stem and everything back. Tie right behind the eye. And then I'll just trim the last bit of stem out of there. And wrap a nice little head. Make sure it's clear of the eye. And in position, over top. And we're finished. There we go. And a little bit of head cement.
That's a really pretty fish. Does it catch flies? I mean, does it catch fish?
Yes, it does. As I said back before, where we were fishing in the Okanagan when I first remember, this is when I was like 15 or 16 years old back then. And
That was a long time ago, Dave.
it was a long time ago. And the evening rise on that particular lake was particularly good. And we would get rainbows that were, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, decent sized rainbows. And there were lots of them. The primary challenge when we was fishing with my dad and Henry was not whacking them in the back of the head with your back gas. Henry used to curse at something awful. But this fly was great back then, but I found that it works just about everywhere. It is if I don't know what to put on, that's the kind of guy I would go to. Grizzly King.
Very nice.
It's a pretty fly, but it worked, and it does work. They do work well. Now I've tied them in that size, and I've also tied them like in a streamer size. I think I got one here. Yeah, this one's more of a streamer size. This got a much longer shank on the hook, but it's the I think it's the barring on the fly of the grizzly and the throat that add that attractiveness to it. So that's that guy. Now, the next fly is another one of those patterns that is is an old one, and again from about that era for me, and it's proven to be one of the most productive flies over the decades that I've been fly fishing. And that's where are we here? That's this guy. And it's the same kind of basic design, same process. It's just I'm going to tie this on a much longer hook. And it's different colors, but this is a very productive fly as well. So the hook for this guy is another Daiichi hook. It's a slightly curved hook. This is a size 10, a little longer because it's a size 10, it's a little longer chain. And it's sort of back. So that, again, this gets debarbed. And the construction of this fly is generally the same. It's called this is a dock spratly. You can tie them on an even longer shank than this one, but this is the one I happen to have the hooks for. So the materials for this are pretty straightforward. The tail is this stuff, which is golden pheasant crest fibers. The body is at this time is black floss, and the tinsel is the same. It's a silver tinsel, and the wing is pheasant tail. So I'll get the pheasant tail out here so you can see it. So the wing is a pheasant tail fibers. Now some of these guys put a little peacock curl on the front, but I don't bother. The hook shank is not quite long enough for that. On some of the longer ones, I put a there we go. So same process. We'll start right behind the eye of the hook. And again, because we want to try and have a relatively smooth body and don't have your stuff wrap around the hook shank, I'll just cover the hook shank with thread and take it back. And this point, I'm going to leave a little bit of exposed bend there. I'm going to stop just shy of where the barb was. Take that there. And for the tail, I'm going to try and pick ones that have a reasonable amount of barring on them, and I don't want them too long. So I'll just pull out of this package a single one, and I'm going to just take a few fibers off of one side, just like that. Just a few. Tear them off so the tips are even. That did not work. Let's try that again. There we go. That's more like it. Take the ones from there. Make sure the tips are even. That's what I'm good. And then I'm going to tie them down right at, and again, this one, I'm just going to take the last black marking and tie that right on the shank of the hook. Cut the excess off the back. And again here, I want that tail to stick up a bit. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to hold it up and wrap behind it. And then wrap in front. And then I'll wrap behind, go forward, wrap in front. And that will cause the tail to stick up, rise up just a little bit. And I'm going to even the body out a little bit with thread. And then once again, back to the back with the tinsel. Same thing again. This is a two-sided tinsel. So it's got gold on one side and silver on the other. And I'm going to tie it in so that the gold side faces me, so that when it flips over when I start tying, it will have the silver side out. Sometimes you got to spin your bobbin to get the twist out of the material, so that the loop falls in the right direction. So there we go. So now I got the gold side facing me. Come up the hook shank again, trying to keep the shank of the hook relatively even. Take my floss and I'll just trim off the ends here a bit. And I will tie that in at the front with a loose wrap. Draw it back a bit. And then wrap right down the fly with my thread to get right back to where the tinsel is started. Bring my thread forward and throw that half hitch so that I can use my bobbin rest. Tinsel out of the way. And I'll make the first wrap right there. Where'd that happen here? Oh, something like that. Okay, I need to get that tinsel in the right spot. And I'll make the first wrap right there. And once again, I'm going to try to keep this floss from unwrapping on me too much. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of little lumps as you go up the shank of the hook. Sometimes you have to give the spool a little twist to keep the floss from unraveling on you. Now, if you wanted to make it real smooth, what you do is you wrap one strand at a time, and then you wrap it 4 times. But I'm too impatient for that. Tinsel out of there. Did do a funny twist there. There we go. That's more like it. When I get there, again, I want to leave a little bit of room at the front for the rest of the fly. Should have had my spool keeper on this. That would have been a little easier to manage. Again, that half hitch. My tinsel is wanting to be in the way. There we go. My bobbin rest there. Okay. We got my first wrap at the back. So the gold is inside. And then we'll once again wrap nice even wraps up the body of the fly. And then stop right at the top. And wrap it over. Not too worried about wrapping a little tinsel further forward of the body because that's going to get buried by the head. Okay. So once again, I'm going to use the same process to put a throat on this thing. Bring the thread back a little bit because I'm going to put the throat right back where that last little bit of tinsel wrap went. And once again, the throat is going to be a grizzly hackle, like the one that I had last time. Let's see if I can strip off enough of these fibers to give a decent throat. Line the tips up and swap them and lay that down right there. And then just again, to get those to stand out, I'm going to go in behind and pull the thread forward a bit. And that'll have them sit right in the gap between the where the throat's hanging and where the hook point is. And then I'm going to take my pheasant tail, and I'll take a good chunk of these to pull them out to the side, pull them off the stem. And I need probably twice as much as that for a proper length. So again, I'll stand those out and I'll line the tips up, pull that next batch off. I want a fairly robust wing on this. Then I'll line all the tips of those two bunches together on the table here. So I have a good clump of pheasant tail where the tips are more or less lined up. And I'm going to have the wing of the fly stand out the back to the length of the tail. So set that down and do a loose wrap and pull up. So that does the pulling up portion keeps the hair on top of the fly. When I get a couple or three good wraps in there, I'll pull the butts up and get here and cut those off right flush with the eye at a bit of an angle. And then I'll build a head. And you end up with because these fibers are pretty bulky, you end up with a fairly good sized head on these flies. Because you have to bury the underside. And again, if you want them to stand up a little bit, I'll bring my thread right back to where I tied that in. Lift them up, do a wrap behind, pull them up, and then do a wrap in front. And that'll keep them from collapsing. And do that one more time. That should keep them from collapsing right down onto the hook shape. There we go. And then let's finish with, I wouldn't finish it wet. Well, we'll do it the hard way. Do it by hand. And that should do it. A little bit of head cement. And just to make sure the eye is not clogged, I'll get my bodkin out and clean the head cement out of the eye of the hook. And that's it. So
Okay. That reminds me of a black panel.
yeah,
Very similar.
yeah. The history on the Doc Spratley is it was invented by a guy from Montana, apparently, who used to fish the interior BC a lot, interior lakes and streams in BC. And his name was Dr. Spratley.
Okay, well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So the fly was named after the guy. So, and it became, I think it was there was a group at the time in BC, a fly fishing group, fly fishing club that was a friend. He was a friend of, and they named it after him. So it's been a popular fly in the interior BC for a very long time. And having fished again, a lot of those high mountain lakes in the interior BC, it's a very effective pattern there. There's, I think, probably the most exotic place I ever fished in interior BC is a lake called Penasque. And you get to it by actually the cutoff that goes from the Coquihalla into Kelowna goes past the lake, but you can't access the lake from the Coquihalla cutoff. You have to go down to just south of Kelowna, and you take a gravel road back up into this lake, which has got a bunch of islands in it. And it used to be owned, all the land around it, except for a few acres that the province had a campground in, used to be owned by the Pennask Lake Company. And the primary shareholder in the Pennask Lake Company was Bing Crosby.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
So that goes back a long way. And that used to be, he used to go there apparently on a regular basis when he was not doing other stuff, when he had a 20 break. He would go there. And so it was there's a high-end lodge somewhere on the lake. But the only time I've ever been there was taking my camper van into the provincial campground that was at one corner of the lake. And the Pennask Lake rainbows, the strain of rainbows, has been used for decades as a broodstock for a lot of BC fisheries.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was interesting in Pennask Lake is the fish used to get a parasite in the gills. And so you'd be driving along the lake and you'd watch these fish come flying out of the water. They'd go like 4 or 5 feet in the end and smack down on the surface because they're trying to shake these parasites.
Uh-huh.
And we used to swear if you had a fast enough boat, you could drive underneath them. You catch them that way.
Mm-hmm.
But my Volkswagen camper, which I actually still own, it's parked in Edmonton with my daughter. It's got a couple of dents in the side from barking into the trees on the way in on this miserable little road that used to go in there. It's an interesting place to fish. So that's a couple of flies from my history.
Well, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, it brings back some memories. There are a lot of those small interior lakes in that neck of the woods. Like I say, there was one that was up from between Kalamalka Lake and Wood Lake, which are on the east side of the Okanagan Valley. There's a ridge of mountains between those lakes and the Okanagan Lake.
Uh-huh.
And then to the east of there, up in the upper country, there were a whole raft of small lakes. There was the one I talked about at Beaver Lake. If you went to the far end of Beaver Lake, you could get through a small creek that would take you into what was called the D Lake chain, and there was a series of lakes that went back from there. If you took the road from the north end of the Kelowna airport and went up back in there, you ended up in Postal Lake, which at one time had a small fishing camp on it, and there was actually 2 small lakes together. And so we would go up and camp there overnight, and then fish one lake one day, and then the next lake the next day. So there were a whole bunch of those little high mountain lakes that had really energetic forms of the rainbow trout that were stocked back there in the 40s or 50s. So interesting country. Yeah. Yeah, and Henry was a neat guy. He made sure every kid that showed up at his resort went fishing with him. He would drag you off up to the north end of the Shuswap River, and we'd fish the creek up there. Yeah, and one of the interesting things, if you could get him liquored up, he would come out. The lodge had a campfire pit on front of it, and people would sit around in the evening in front of the campfire. If you could get him liquored up a little bit, he would get his violin and he would come out and play you gypsy violin for an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, he quite the character. Yeah.
Good.
I went bird hunting with him once too.
Is Florent tying today?
I don't believe so. Now, let me just get away from here. Florin is no, he's babysitting his home renovations.
Oh, okay.
There, it looks like he is tying, but not for us.
That's okay.
He doesn't have to. Anyway, yeah, Florin is in the midst of
We're a little bit out of time here,
yeah,
so
that's okay.
I'm tying these this is an island fly, right? This is depending on whom you talk to, originated somewhere around Comox and then was mislabeled American Coachman. And this is a version with a few strands of crystal flash in it. And deviating again from the recipe by putting polar bear both in the tail and in the wing. And so I think it should be more aptly named the Canadian Coachman. And it's supposed to be a cutthroat fly.
We should start making a few GRR originals.
Yeah. Well, the next fly I'm about to tie here, but I'm only going to do that if Dave turns off the recording.
Yeah, I can do that.
Um,
Let's do that. We're finished for the most part.
but I don't think I'll be able to do that in the remaining time because that's a little bit of an improvisation.